Dr. Zachary? Dr. Terry Zachary, you are out of the country, literally.
Literally, I am in a suburb of Vancouver, Canada called Langley. Beautiful up here, mountains. It's gorgeous.
Yeah, it's been a while since I've been up in that area, but Langley, yes. I remember the good old days of traveling up north. So thank you for joining me today, and thanks for coming on Behind the Story. Uh, so, Dr. Zachary, can you give a little bit of background, the behind the story of who you are, how you came about to be a doctor, and then we want to know the doctor of what?
Well, Chuck, first of all, thanks for having me on your show. I really love what you do. And my backstory, behind the story for me is, I grew up as a sports nut. I'm from Canada, as we've talked about, so it's almost by rule. I grew up playing hockey and basketball. I was really interested in, eventually caught on to golf. And golf is really where I think I started getting really technical into the fine nitty gritty of how you get better at a sport, for example. And from there, just all the motion of the body and how the mechanics work, I became interested in being a sports chiropractor as I got older. Really wanted to, spend my time studying how things best work and maybe how I could help other athletes if I wasn't going to pursue athletics myself, other athletes. I could help them how they could perform better. And that was kind of what my vision was when I got into practice. So yeah, I'm a doctor of chiropractic. I'm a sports chiropractor. About half my practice was sports, half family. So I saw a little bit of everything.
So I'm gonna take a leap of faith and say that in the golf and your grip is very important. And did that lead into, you know, your book, Great Hands, Great Life,
Yeah,
because you found
yeah.
out that the grip is important?
Yep, Chuck, it's exactly where it originally came from. So I'd almost have to backpedal a little bit. So before I went to travel with professional golfers and try to take a run myself at playing professional golf, I saw a lot of athletes that had repetitive grip problems. So it was golfers, but it was tennis players, hockey players were a big, uh, were a, I would see a lot of hockey players that had these problems, gymnasts, etc. And in our area of Langley, there's pretty good hotbed of all of those. So I was able to recognize quite quickly that when I did my histories, I would ask, what types of things they did. I could tell they were repetitive grippers in their sport, and it was mostly sports at that time. I would ask them what they do for training, and most of them would do the traditional, what I grew up with, take something and squeeze it. And throughout my schooling and throughout working with athletes, I soon recognized that that is not the way that we were traditionally taught, is really a poor way to go about it. We've got 9 muscles that close the hand that are basically located on the front of the hand, wrist, and forearm and elbow. They connect throughout that whole upper extremity. But we also have 9 muscles that open and spread the hand, and they're vital. And they're on the back of the fingers, thumb, hand, wrist, carpal tunnel, and elbow. So they are very tricky to study, and it seems to me that that's why people stayed away from this area. But in general, when we educate people, we tell them 9 muscles in the front, 9 muscles on the back, and we have to keep them balanced. So when I saw those athletes in practice before I was even on the golf tours, I knew that we showed them probably 4 or 5 exercises, Chuck. And yes, we did some stuff with closing, but most of what we did was opening and spreading muscles so we could rebalance all the structures and start to stimulate blood flow and proper lymph drainage. And then the athletes would get better, and then we would retrain them on how to train their hands. So that was when I entered with golf, I really had my background of understanding how to train the muscles. But when I got out there, I guess I assumed that most of the players would they know their golf equipment inside out, shaft flexes, torques, weights, kick points, lofts and lies, everything. But they really didn't know much about their bodies and especially about their grip. So eventually people found out that I was traveling the same groups a lot of the tours, so they would find out that I was a sports chiropractor. And I got approached with a lot of repetitive grip problems like fingers, thumbs, carpal tunnels, and elbows, and wrists were the main ones. And it was always the same story. But now I didn't have much time, Chuck. When I showed them 4 or 5 exercises, it was hard for them to remember. It was hard for them to get all, find the right elastic band, find the right, compression mechanism. And it really got complicated. But it was really easy for me to see the problem. And it was over and over and over. And I realized, okay, I got to do something about this. And that's when I started working on an exercise product, which is called Handmaster Plus, that eventually led to the book, which is Great Hands, Great Life.
The Handmaster Plus, early on, you're mentioning, like me too, you see these commercials way back, the grip, it's just a matter of squeezing, but your Handmaster Pro actually helps with the spread as well, right? Grip, spread.
Yeah, it's exactly the thing. So what we would do, Chuck, I mean, if I got into the complications of where the hand muscles originate and where they insert onto, and it gets really, really tricky. That's why they have a whole profession of hand therapists and hand surgeons specifically, because it does get complicated. But when we dumb the general layout down for people that are just looking to strengthen their hands properly, we basically look at the muscles that close the hand, so the flexor muscles. And that's like you're talking about, what you and I, and probably most of your viewers grew up with, is you would take something and squeeze it. Now, I always had a problem as I got into practice where if you've got a coiled unit or a spring-loaded unit, those are basically resisting in 2 dimensions. They're not really putting your hand through its full natural range of motion. It's 2 dimensions and it's a small range of motion of squeezing. So I never loved that to begin with. But when we developed Handmaster Plus, what we would have to also accomplish is, in practice, we would take different resistance bands and we would put them so you could open and spread the fingers for the extensor muscles, which is the main part of the opening. But if you took an elastic band and I put them on those, eventually I couldn't go through a full range of motion, or the elastic band would just fall right back. And I didn't like that, but it was better than nothing, right? Then to get the squeezing muscles, we would have to change the elastic band to get all the muscles of spreading. And those muscles are really important, especially in like carpal tunnel, if we talk about that today. The muscles that spread the hand are what opposes all the muscles that, close the hand. So Handmaster Plus, the challenge was, and my challenge was, I needed to figure out something where the golfers wouldn't be confused. They would be able to do something that's really quick and easy to communicate. And one particular golfer, Chuck, there was a fellow that I was traveling with. He became a really good friend of mine, and he had a wife and children at home. At the time when I was traveling, I didn't have any children, so it was still a difficult venture, because on mini tours where I was playing, you have to finish like top 3 or 4 even to make any kind of money, and it's very competitive. So this fellow had risked a stable career to come out and play golf. He was traveling with me, and he had developed a tennis elbow so bad that he couldn't even lift the coffee cup. So he couldn't practice, he couldn't play, he was really stressed out. And that's really the one that got my attention, where I need to do something for this person and still have time for my own golf. So strangely enough, no sooner did I think of that, it was only it seemed like, I don't know if this is completely accurate, but it was only days later where it's that 4 o'clock in the morning thing. All of a sudden, something came like, wait a minute. If I took the compression component, which is usually some type of a ball, if I made it custom for for closing the hand, and then put an elastic band through that and designed it, I could give this to them and they could just close and open and spread. I could get full range of motion. It would be natural. I wouldn't have to worry about this like 2-dimensional. It would be 3-dimensional. And I remember just waking up 4 o'clock in the morning, and that was it. And I started doing drawings. I started studying it, putting together a really rough prototype. And I got the rough prototype to this fellow, started having him work with it and monitor it. And in no time, boom, muscles are rebalanced, blood flow is reestablished, lymph drainage is reestablished, and he's doing well. And I know I followed him for many years. He's been doing well since. So that type of a question where I'm looking at it going, we got a problem and I feel like I'm the one to solve it. And next thing you know, it's just like, this little notion just dropped into my head and came through me. And then that's where Handmaster Plus came from.
Wow. While you're telling that story and explaining everything, I find myself squeezing my hand and opening my hand to see, how does it feel, because of the fact that um, I guess I'll say I coined the phrase of carpal fummel, because not my carpal tunnel, but because of the fact I was in the habit of texting so much, and with the larger phones, you're reaching across that repeat motion, and I felt that same carpal tunnel, but more on my thumb, and it was hard to grip. So your product sounds like it goes beyond just sports folks. It can go for anybody that needs to work on their, I don't want to say work on the grip, but what do we want to say? Get better range of motion and feel more comfortable with what they do with their hands. It's people who text a lot, musicians. I can see this would be great for guitar players, drummers too.
Chuck, it's what you're talking about is exactly how this progressed. And it wasn't like when we started out, it had a lot to do with how do I help golfers perform better, train their muscles better. I definitely felt a lot like I wanted to accomplish what I needed to accomplish as far as preventing injuries in these golfers, because I just saw them so often. But then I realized that you're right, Chuck. It ends up being not just a it's not just an exercise for golfers or tennis players or hockey players, which I realized quickly that, man, this could really help my other athletes. But then we started to see the exact same imbalance, like you say, even with people that text, the texter's thumb, mothers that have a new baby, for example, there's a mother's thumb, and it's all from the same imbalance. There's these same imbalances where the muscles that close the hand are shortened, but the muscles that open and spread and actually support the grip have not been paid attention to at all. And that's what we saw. Musicians is a classic example. If you look at all the musicians, they are still classically, even to this day, and we're starting to make a lot of headway in this area of understanding these muscles. But even to this day, there's musicians will take something and start squeezing it, even though that's what they're doing really all day in performing. And Chuck, what I do is sometimes to make it easier to illustrate what we're talking about is it's very similar to posture. If you came in to somebody and asked them about their posture and they were an expert and they told you, okay, well, we're seeing you that your posture's not very good. We want you to slouch more. That's kind of what it's like. It's like we're taking people the wrong way, and this is something that needs to be communicated so that we can start to just understand this area. It's a beautifully designed area, but we've always understood it poorly. And if we just look at how it's designed, work with exactly how the hand muscles are laid out and do it properly, it's just amazing how much better the performance is, but also injuries it's virtually eliminated, the chance of injury.
So this may sound like a silly question, but do you feel like you've accomplished what you've set out to do with the product?
Well, that's a really good question. Chuck, I absolutely mechanically do. And I think in the last probably 4 or 5 years of that, again, in anything we do, it's like, this seems pretty obvious to me. And I think this is a good solution. But as we started studying it, like we do EMG studies on our exercise compared to other exercises, there's also been thermography studies done, and we publish this on our website, like anybody can have a look at it. And we start to see that it is, it's like 2 to 1 that the results that we're getting. And so Chuck, the reason why that's such a good question is I do feel like we've brought this great solution, and the solution is we're getting all 18 muscles of the hand, the 9 muscles that close and the 9 muscles that open, moving through a full range of motion, natural range of motion, 3-dimensionally with resistance. You just can't, there's not much you can do better about that. The challenge we have, Chuck, is to be able to re-educate the public. So the product itself, the exercise itself, I'm thrilled with how that has all turned out. Again, I still think it kind of came through me. I don't really think that I just, invented this. It came through me, and it's a bit of a blessing. But the difficult thing is it's a big world out there, and make sure people are really understanding it. And, through the last basically decade and a half, I think we've affected a lot of people and changed the way that people are looking at their hands and exercising their hands.
I agree with what you're saying as far as having to re-educate the public as far as the importance of your hand and the muscles and how it works, and probably to really use products such as yours to make it work. It's not a one-time fix. You imagine you have to use it,
Yeah.
but because this is so important, and you have your book, where can they go to find out more information as far as the book, the product, and about you?
Yeah, and for any of your viewers, listeners, etc., Chuck, they don't have to feel like they're interrupting me ever. So our website is doczac.com. My email is info@doczac.com. So it's doczac.com, and and they can ask any questions they want. I really enjoy the education side and getting people to understand. And there's many different conditions. There's different things in the forearm, and we can talk to people about how to do that. The book is available. It's Great Hands, Great Life. It's available online. Just search it. You'll find it pretty easily. Amazon is usually what we recommend to go to. And the book itself, it really lays out all the different areas, why the fingers need to be exercised this way, why the thumbs, why the hands, why the wrists. Carpal tunnel has a whole chapter, and then the elbows also have a chapter. As I spoke to you about the friend that was really had the debilitating tennis elbow, it was one of the major things that got me into really studying this in detail, further than what I had in practice before. So Great Hands, Great Life. They can find that on Amazon. And by the time they're done reading that, they'll literally know more than most therapists and trainers about the hands. Because as we visit with therapists and trainers, it just seems to be this area that people have stayed away from in a really detailed manner.
I'm going to have to add onto this, because if people have not experienced it, or if they've experienced it and they don't know what it is, I can say that at times it can be pretty painful with that, I'll call it cramping, or the grip, especially playing guitar.
Yep.
It's not comfortable. It's not fun. So if there's anything that can help me, this sounds like it's definitely something that can. And I personally should look into doing this, because, yeah, I'll say it can be debilitating, because I'll reach for a glass. Like I said, there was a point when it was really bad for me. It was hard to reach and pick up a 16-ounce bottle of iced tea.
Yes,
I mean,
exactly.
it really hurt.
Yeah. Hey, Chuck, so you bring that up, and I didn't mean to veer away from music, because music is an enormous market that is still taking spring-loaded stuff and squeezing it. And, in the short term, a musician might feel that and go like, wow, I am getting stronger. It's like doing chest exercises, but never the back exercises. In the short term, yes, of course, you're strengthening muscles. So you're going to feel benefit from them. You're going to feel some strength from it. You're going to progress, but in the long term, you're slowly building imbalance too. So this concept of guitar players, for example, that you brought up, they're playing guitar, they're flexing all the time. We've worked with several guitar players. We work with GHS Strings as one of our brand partners. So they've given us access to like hugely famous musicians. I can't sit there and name drop. It's just not something we're able to do. But they're Hall of Fame musicians. There's one band in particular that I grew up listening to, idolizing, and then you meet them. And I met the lead guitar player, who was, I was a huge fan of. And I met him casually. That we came in because they were having some problems with their hands and wrists, most specifically. And this fellow had been a guitar player, well, it would be probably 40 years. And we talked to him for 3 minutes, and he said, "Do you think this would help my arthritis?" Because they've been doing this um, for such a long time, and eventually they're building themselves more and more into that imbalance. And we started working with them, and pretty soon, blood flow, lymph drainage, and the body's going through its full range of motion, supporting the joints properly. And all of a sudden, you see performance coming around, and these symptoms going away because the symptoms have a cause. And with guitar players, now if they just, the other thing about it, Chuck, really to talk about with how we train them now is we don't have to talk to them for an hour about this. When they put the product on, I've got a product on, or a product here if you want to have a look.
Yes, please.
So I'll put it on, and really simply, I don't have to now explain 4 or 5 exercises to anybody. So I put the product on, Handmaster Plus, I close against a ball, and I open and spread against the cord. Okay, and I close and I open and spread. If somebody can't remember to close and open and spread, they've got more problems than than just having hand problems. So, but now, all joking aside, it's really easy for them, and they continue to go until they feel a comfortable fatigue, which usually takes 30 seconds to a minute to begin with. And then, as you work with it more, your hands get a little stronger. It might be a minute, minute and a half. But they strengthen and balance all those 18 muscles instead of worrying about 4 or 5 exercises that are not convenient. So yeah, for people like a musician, that should be in your guitar bag. You pull it out, you can do it a couple of times a day, maybe warm up and cool down with it. It's super simple now. And the reason I go on about that, Chuck, is that we really, now there's no excuses to not properly train this important area. Because now it becomes, really super simple. It's literally 1 or 2 minutes.
It seems like our hands are probably one of the most important things that we have on our bodies because it allows us to grip. Well, other animals, if they don't have, digits, fingers, they're not grabbing, they're not working. This can go with construction. I'm thinking this can go with guys with construction who work on jackhammers all day. That vibration is bad. Guys that hammer, that's really bad. Screwdrivers, manual, this is your hands. It's really important. So being able to exercise them properly and understand what you're doing, I think it's going to be beneficial for everyone. Like you said, from sports to music to everyday people.
Yeah, Chuck, you've just basically covered what it's interesting when we talk about Handmaster Plus specifically. We talk about the concept because remember when I got into this, as we've talked about, I was looking for a solution basically for the golfers, and I knew it probably would pour over into the hockey players and tennis players that I've worked with and those types of markets. But it didn't take long to realize. You talk about, people that are in the trades, et cetera, et cetera. Dentistry is they've got huge problems with repetitive grip, especially dental hygienists. They're now working with smaller tools, palm down, that puts a lot more pressure on the elbows because now we have to hold the wrist up plus do the work, and they don't get a lot of breaks. It's a mechanical vibration that they're carrying. But we get into so many applications now that there is problems with. And so that's kind of, somebody might look at our little business and say, well, that's great. You've got all these people, but it's really, really hard to communicate with that many people. And so we generally educate the public to kind of come to their own conclusions about it. And it's a lot of word of mouth, how we get these people in properly trained for whatever their pursuit is. But it is all encompassing. The other thing, Chuck, is that, so we started out just looking at mechanics. Hey, I want to balance the muscles. I want to get things better. I want to make sure that all these structures like the fingers and the thumb and the hand and the wrist and the carpal tunnel and the elbow become in balance. And for probably the first 6 or 7 years, we saw that was really doing well. But the other thing you talk about is, and I don't think I really knew this till we were probably 10 years in, we had always had stories about somebody saying, I worked with this, my elbow's feeling good, or my carpal tunnel or finger or wrist or whatever, but I'm actually feeling better, I'm sleeping better. And I know that this might sound like a stretch to listeners, and I don't blame them because it sounded like a stretch to me to begin with. And I just thought, okay, well, we've taken a bit of a headache away from them. Their thumb isn't bothering them, or their carpal tunnel isn't bothering them, or their elbow isn't bothering them. So they probably are just less stress. But then we started to get studies sent to me. There's probably 5 or 6 really large, really famous studies about where they correlate grip strength directly with life longevity. And again, that might sound like a stretch to somebody, but when you say how important the hands are, I think this area has been overlooked to a fault, because when we started looking at this, and then I started really looking closer, when we get blood flow and lymph drainage out to our periphery, like out to our hands, we really stimulate, because our lymph ducts, if you can see this okay, our lymph ducts are kind of up in our shoulders, just away from the upper extremities. And as we increase lymph flow, we're going to increase the efficiencies of these lymph ducts, which basically are draining toxins and byproducts out of our body. They're kind of like a garbage system. So we feel like just by strengthening the upper extremity and getting better blood flow to the fingers and thumb and all the way out there, that we are for sure helping circulation and possibly improving the function of the lymph ducts, which is now you're getting into a whole systemic benefit, because those lymph ducts are draining the entire lymph system of the body, head and neck and arms and legs and everything. So I didn't mean to go on that, Chuck, but when you talk about how important the hands are, I would have said they're important because they connect you to everything you do in your life. But they're also really important because if we can get blood flow and lymph drainage improved right to the periphery, we feel we're actually improving the circulation of your whole body.
Well, with you saying that, I mean, I this might be a stretch, so I'll put it into my mouth and say it is, with diabetes, you have issues with blood flow to your extremities, and your hands tend to get cold because you don't get blood flow. If this helps with that, again, it's not just sports, it's not just trade, it's not musicians, it's everybody. And for diabetics, maybe it might help with that blood flow to the hands and increase that blood circulation, so it may make it more comfortable or better.
I actually think, again, and we're talking about, and it's nothing I expected you and I to talk about. It sometimes goes here, Chuck, when we talk about this area, but you are exactly right. So diabetics will have the problem of peripheral blood flow always. That's a pretty commonly known thing. It's a well-known problem of diabetics, and so you need to stimulate. But when your body, so my body has so many functions to do every second, every moment of every day. So Chuck, if you're never exercising your hands, or you're taking them through some small range of motion like we used to, your body's basically saying, Chuck's not really using all the muscles, and they're not using the forearms to the extent he should be, or well, your body's got other things to do. It's digesting food, it's balancing hormones, it's trying to keep you balanced with your environment. So it doesn't say that's a part of your regular environment, I'm not going to worry about it. But once you start using those hands, and again, we take the hands through completely full, natural, three-dimensional range of motion with resistance, with proper resistance. Now my body is getting challenged, and my internal brain has got to be saying, Chuck is taking his hands, wrists, forearms through their full range of motion now. This is a whole different environment. I got to open up a little more blood flow, maybe make the drainage system a little bit better. And that's the adjustment your body makes, right? Because you've brought that environment to it daily. So by all means, anybody with any kind of peripheral blood flow issues, there's no reason why they should not be exercising these hands through their full range of motion on a regular basis. And I would even say, again, if you look at studies about grip strength and longevity, I would say there's no reason for everybody to be taking their hands through a full natural range of motion and stimulating as much blood flow and lymph drainage, as well as the muscle balance and strength and performance and balance that we've been talking about through this whole session. but circulation to me has turned into one of the more, important things that I would use this for is general wellness, and especially in diabetic situations or even arthritic situations. Um, that there's a soft one, by the way. So
Oh,
if somebody's in an arthritic situation, they would look at the soft one. But even viewers at home, your audience, Chuck, they can even just take in your hand without a Handmaster on it. Take your hand, put it through its full natural range of motion. In the meantime, you'll get some resistance just by doing that, and you'll stimulate some blood flow and some lymph drainage, and that'll improve. And then after time, you can certainly put some resistance on that with Handmaster. But you can do it at home starting right now, and you'll get a feel for it after a minute. You'll go, wow, I'm starting to feel that.
wow. So we've been talking a lot about the Handmaster, and then you do have that book, Great Hands, Great Life.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about the book, what the book is, what it entails, what it will benefit for the readers and things?
Yes, yeah. So the book, Chuck, is again, it'll go through a little bit of my backstory, just so I like the concept that the readers get to know a little bit about who you are and how you got a passion for your particular area that you're focusing on. But then it goes really closely. So if anybody wants to know about this, not so much about the anatomy, but how the body functions, maybe how we've got exercise wrong over the years. There's some parts of the book dedicated to that. But the book eventually goes into sports categories. So it talks about, and it'll go into the exercises that are available with Handmaster Plus, Chuck. So there's 3 or 4 really standard exercises. For example, a climber, I won't put the ball on and stuff, but a climber, for example, is going to need real stronger flexion distally in their fingers and thumbs. And there's an exercise where they would just put the product on. They would just grab the outside and then explode the fingers that way. So we get a little bit specific for all the sports. We get specific then. There's a chapter on music where you can look up your pursuit and how we've come to the conclusion of best training that over the years. So it goes through the different areas of your body that it helps. And like I say, fingers, thumbs are covered, the hand, the carpal tunnel, the wrist, and then it gets into forearm and elbow, which is a really important area if anybody's had elbow problems, or if you're like in these repetitive grip jobs or sports or music and you want to train properly. So it's all about, the book will tell you all about not just preventing injury, but maximizing your performance. We really talk more about why do you want to wait for an injury? Why don't you keep these areas thriving? And here's how you train them so that you thrive and your performance is maximized. And then the chance of injury is virtually eliminated. But it will go into all the different workplaces, and it'll show a lot of the studies we've done as well. So the book really is, by the time you're done it, you're going to know everything that we know we've put on the book. And it's been a big recap of this area that has been, I think, ignored, not by purpose, but I think it's just been a confusing area where we've thought for many years, hey, we've got things figured out. We take something and squeeze it. And for some reason that is in people's psyche. And it really, that's got to change because it's not the way to train this area.
If you don't mind, I'd like to add in, don't just think about the large muscle groups and build up the large muscles. Think about the small muscles too. And again,
Yep.
we're going back to your hands are very, very important. And you have small muscles, small bones. So really work on that.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. Hey, Chuck, you bring another good point. If anybody goes into the gym, so if there's any fitness buffs out there and you're going into the gym, it's another way that the hands have been kind of ignored in this whole conversation over the years. So let's say, for example, we work with like pitchers. We work with pitchers. So a pitcher, we would really want them to be able to exercise their lateral form because they've got their medial form when they go to throw it is under a lot of pressure. So that has got to have good blood flow. It's got to be healthy tissue. It can't be shortened tissue or it'll tear too easily. But if I release a ball, now the outside of my elbow is under a lot of stress on the release. So when I throw a ball, It's the medial elbow that's under stress. And when I release a ball, it's the lateral elbow that's under stress. I don't want to complicate things, but that's why these areas have to be in balance so that we're not getting all the injuries that we always are. But what do we do when we're trying to train that shoulder to be stronger? We're grabbing something and holding it. And we're always holding a resistance. So all the time that I'm doing resistance for my bigger muscle groups, as you're talking about, if I'm doing chest, if I'm doing back, if I'm doing deltoids, okay, I'm always grabbing something and squeezing it. And that's the problem, is that over time we shorten those flexor muscles, and yet the extensor muscles never go through their full range of motion. So we build these imbalances as we think about the bigger muscles, as you're talking about. So that's where I see a lot of problems coming up, is a lot of the athletes we've dealt with, if they're in the gym, they're actually creating repetitive grip injuries as they train these bigger, more noticeable muscles. And even more of the reason to say, hey, you have to offset all that gripping you're doing. As you train those bigger muscles, you have to pay attention to the upper extremities, because they're going to become imbalanced. And if, as we talked about earlier, Chuck, if the fingers and thumb in your grip becomes imbalanced, or God forbid, like you have an injury there and it's debilitating, then you can't go train the rest, because you need the hands to hold the resistance or to hold the weight.
This conversation is really making me think about a lot of things. And again, this might be a stretch because I am no expert in this, but what you're saying as far as I think of it as, when we were kids, we were a little bit more flexible. We've done some things and it's easier. The older we've gotten, we've trained our muscles to not use that full range of motion. So if anybody out there is I'll say 30 plus, who hasn't thrown a ball in a long time, and you go to throw the ball, it hurts like heck. All like I said, right through here, your shoulders, the works, because we haven't been using the full range, the hands and all of that. So is it a stretch for me to say this sounds like it could be very helpful for all of that?
It's not a stretch at all, Chuck. And to add on to that topic that you're talking about, how many times do we say, and I've heard it over and over, and I always, have to be that guy in the conversation that gets people thinking this way. But a lot of people, 30 plus, 40 plus, 50 plus will say, well, it's just the fact is I'm getting old. Right? And so I know that statement is not accurate at all. Now, what happens is we don't understand our body. Okay, so I will go in again. We're talking about the hands and this area. So if I'm gripping, let's say I'm that guitar player. Okay, if I'm a guitar player and I'm grip, when we're younger, like we talk to young bands too. We talk to young musicians. We through our affiliations with GHS and with some of the bigger bands, we do get to talk to the younger musicians. And if you talk to them about injury prevention, they're just almost not paying attention, because the body is still so pliable, and you have to create a major imbalance or a major overuse for some of the young musicians to understand what we're talking about. When we speak to younger musicians, we usually talk about performance. What about your speed? What about your stretch? What about your stamina, your ability to play for longer and, play quicker, and et cetera, et cetera. We talk to them about performance. But the thing about it is, eventually they're going to get, the years go by, Chuck, don't they? Pretty soon, they're going to become 30 and they're going to become 40. And if they don't understand the mechanics of this area, let alone any area, but this area, eventually, as I know, they're becoming imbalanced. I know they're going to have problems. I could explain all the problems that they've opened themselves to. But if they've never been exposed to the mechanics of this area, they would just say, oh, it just hurts back here. I'm just getting old. And I say this strongly, Chuck, because we get to see those people that are just getting old. And then we restore the mechanics. We get them actually use, as long as their heart's still beating and they can still get blood flow and they can get nutrients and oxygen to these areas, they can heal. Okay, so as we get them going through these ranges of motion, we have a few different exercises depending on what problem they're having. But these people that are just getting old, we talk to them, they meet us, and we get them just doing these basic full range of motion exercises with resistance. We reawaken these muscles that haven't had attention for decades. We get blood flow, we get it strong, we get balance back, and the next thing they know, they have full range of motion, even on an old injury. So when you say this concept about, is it a stretch to go beyond, like somebody throwing a ball, they haven't thrown up, they're 40 years old, they haven't thrown a ball for 15 years, and they go to throw it. Well, it's pretty unreasonable for the body to understand, to throw it perfectly if you haven't, trained that motion in it, and you haven't trained it to do that. But we can keep our bodies going with simple full range of motion exercises. It doesn't even matter the part of your body, but it has to be done regularly, or like we talked about earlier, that your body's got lots to do with digesting food and growing hair and, balancing hormones and repairing this, repairing that, creating energy. So it's not going to spend time maximizing the efficiency of something that's not part of your environment. And then, yes, you can hurt yourself or feel old if you choose not to do these things, but it's just a matter of reawakening these muscles and reestablishing blood flow and lymph drainage and proper body mechanics to reawaken these areas. There's a point where you will get old, but I think that's an excuse for not understanding your body and actually not putting in the time to maintain the health of your body.
Wow. This has been really enlightening and helpful for me, and hopefully for all the viewers and listeners, but it's comforting to know that it's not too late. And I know you hear that it's never too late.
Absolutely.
So that is really comforting to know that I can retrain and I can become healthy again and prevent. This is like preventative medicine. It prevents injury once you start doing this. So
yeah. But Chuck, one thing I'll point out about that is obviously, like, in the way that, if somebody is, for our example, like if they're feeling older, their hands, or they have elbow problems or something like that, you start slow, obviously, but you slowly reestablish, and it can be done. I agree with you.
Yeah. Well, again, this has been really, really enlightening. So I definitely need to go to your website. What was that website again that we wanted to direct folks to?
Yeah, so Chuck, our two websites, doczac.com is doczac.com, or we also have the website Handmaster Plus that they can go directly to. Doczac.com will lead them to Handmaster Plus, but for people that are looking specifically for Handmaster Plus, you can just go to handmasterplus.com. It'll show the people that carry them. It's sold online as well, but it's very affordable, and it's very complete. And anybody that depends on their hands or has had a history of any problems in this area, I can't rent. Obviously, it's my product, but I see that if you look at traditional ways and you grab something and squeeze it, that's not going to solve an imbalance, and it's not going to get you to your best balance. So we do really recommend our product. It's full range of motion, and I think it's easy to use. I think people will really enjoy it, and they'll get a lot of value out of it.
Fantastic. Well, Dr. Zachary, thank you very much for your time. And like I said, it was very, very informative. So I really appreciate that.
Well, Chuck, hey, thanks for having me. I was looking really forward to speaking on this podcast. I really like what you do. So thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.